All right, folks, buckle up. Today, we're going deep, deep down into some serious mad scientist territory.
Oh, sounds exciting. I'm ready when you are.
We're talking Ussing chamber sliders and Snapwell culture inserts. Ring any bells?
Well, unless you're hanging out in cell biology labs, probably not.
Right. But trust me, the way scientists use these things, it's wild.
Absolutely. It's like they're building these miniature organs right on tiny membranes to study how stuff moves in and out of our bodies.
It's kind of giving me Frankenstein vibes, but like in a good way.
Yeah, I get that.
So we're talking about this whole transepithelial transport thing, right?
Yeah,
How things pass through those cell layers lining our organs.
exactly. And you know what's really cool? This technique has been huge in understanding genetic diseases like cystic fibrosis, where that transport process gets all messed up.
Okay, now you've got my attention, especially since we're dealing with some pretty high-tech gear here. Stuff like the P2302 EasyMount Slider from Physiologic Instruments.
Oh yeah, that's a serious piece of equipment. And it's designed to perfectly position that Snapwell insert inside the Ussing chamber.
Okay, back up for a sec. What even is the Snapwell insert? Why is it such a big deal?
Picture a teeny tiny petri dish, but with a special twist. It has a membrane at the bottom, and that's where the magic happens.
Oh, I see. So they're growing cells on this membrane.
You got it. Like
Oh.
a single organized layer of cells mimicking how a real organ lining would look.
Whoa, so it's like they're growing a mini organ in a dish. That's pretty wild.
It is. And they make sure these cells grow into this, what's called a confluent layer. That's key.
Confluent layer, huh? Why is that so important?
Think of it like building a brick wall. If there are gaps between those bricks, things can just slip right through. Same with cells.
Ah, I'm with you. So a confluent layer means a tight barrier, just like in our bodies, right?
Exactly. That way, scientists can accurately measure what's moving across.
That makes total sense. Okay, so where does the Ising chamber fit into all of this?
Think of the Ussing chamber as the stage where this whole Snapwell show takes place. It's a device with two compartments, and that membrane with the cells on it acts like a wall between them.
Okay, got it.
Researchers then add solutions to each side on either side of that membrane, and then they track how things move through the cell layer.
Whoa, hold on. So it's like two compartments, a membrane with cells in the middle, and scientists are just watching as molecules try to cross over.
That's a great way to think about it.
Okay, so that's where this P2302 EasyMount Slider comes in, right?
Exactly. The slider is this special holder that makes sure the Snapwell insert is snug and secure right between those compartments. So nothing leaks out and messes up the experiment.
Ah, so it's all about precision, no room for mistakes when you're dealing with such a delicate system.
You got it. The slider is all about making sure things are sealed tight and the results are reliable, which is, crucial for any scientific research,
Oh,
right?
of course, of course. Okay, walk me through this. How does this whole Ussing chamber setup work? What are the actual steps involved?
Well, first things first, you got to carefully remove the Snapwell insert from its holder. Kind of like prepping a tiny athlete for a big race.
Uh-huh, I like that. Precision and a steady hand are key here. Then what?
Then you gently place it into the slider, making sure it's facing the right way. It's kind of like putting together a tiny puzzle.
Gotcha. So what happens next?
Next, you got to slide this whole assembly into the Ussing chamber, just like slotting a cartridge into a game console. You'll hear a click when it's in place.
I can almost hear that satisfying click. So last step.
This is it. You gently tighten this thumb screw, and that creates the seal between the chamber and the slider. You want it tight, but not too tight, Too much pressure, and you could damage that delicate cell layer.
Sounds like a delicate dance between precision and caution, but I'm guessing researchers get the hang of it pretty quickly.
Oh, totally. After a while, they become total Ussing chamber masters. And the P2302 EasyMount Slider has made things so much easier and faster for them. Now researchers can run way more experiments in a day.
Wow, that's awesome. I bet that speed has been a game changer, especially for areas like drug discovery, right?
You're absolutely right. The efficiency the slider brings has really sped up research in a bunch of different fields.
So this is where things get super interesting. Now we got to talk about cystic fibrosis and how this Ussing chamber has helped us understand it better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because cystic fibrosis, it's all about a problem with how certain substances are transported across cell layers, right? And the Ussing chamber lets us see exactly where things go wrong.
Exactly. Think of it like having a magnifying glass, right? You can zoom in and actually see the cellular machinery in action. Researchers can even test out potential drugs using the Ussing chamber to see how they affect that transport process.
Wow. This is all starting to click now. From growing cells on a membrane to using this super advanced chamber to actually study how stuff moves around.
Hmm.
It's amazing how scientists figured out how to recreate and study what happens inside our bodies.
Yeah, it is truly remarkable. Yeah, it really is a testament to how clever humans can be figuring all this stuff out. And, something in the research caught my eye. It mentions the Ussing chamber being used not just for transport studies, but for something called electrophysiological studies, too.
Electro what now? You're going to have to break that one down for me?
No worries. It's actually simpler than it sounds. It basically means they're measuring the electrical activity happening across those cell layers.
Wait, so our cells have, like, electrical currents running through them.
Many of them do, especially nerve and muscle cells. It's how they communicate and function.
So it's like tiny electrical conversations happening between the cells.
That's a great way to put it. And the Ussing chamber gives researchers a way to eavesdrop on those conversations, to see how cells talk to each other and how they react to different things.
So we're not just talking about what physically moves across the cell layer, but also the electrical signals flying back and forth. That adds a whole other level of complexity.
Oh, for sure. And it opens up tons of new research possibilities.
Okay, I'm picturing this Snapwell snugly in place in the Ussing chamber.
Yeah.
What happens next? Do they just start pouring stuff into the chamber all willy-nilly?
Definitely not. It's all very precise. Researchers carefully add specific solutions to each compartment, basically creating two different environments for the cells to interact with.
So it's like setting up two different worlds for the cells to experience. One side could be mimicking the inside, the intestine, and the other, the bloodstream or something like that.
Exactly. And by tweaking what's in those solutions, researchers can study how different things move across that cell layer. They can see what gets absorbed, what gets secreted, what gets totally blocked.
So it's like a tiny controlled border crossing for molecules.
Perfect analogy. They can even introduce drugs or other compounds into the mix to see how they affect that whole transport process.
Hold on, I'm looking at the instructions for this thing, and it mentions something about airline fittings. What's that about? Giving the cells a little air supply to breathe?
You're not far off. Those fittings are for introducing air or gas mixtures into the chamber.
Okay, why?
Well, a couple of reasons. First, it helps keep the solutions well mixed, so the cells experience a consistent environment.
Like a tiny jacuzzi for the cells, to keep them happy and relaxed while they're being studied.
You could say that. But more importantly, sometimes oxygen is crucial for the cells to do their thing, so the air supply keeps them healthy and functioning.
Makes sense. Unhappy cells mean wonky results, right?
Yeah.
This whole setup, the Ussing chamber with the Snapwell and the slider, it's all pretty elegant, isn't it?
Totally. It really shows how clever scientists can be when they're designing ways to study life. And think about it by understanding how things move across cell layers. We learn a lot about how drugs are absorbed, how we take up nutrients, even how diseases develop.
It's like opening a window into the inner workings of our bodies.
Precisely. And that window has given us a whole new perspective on how our bodies interact with the world around us.
Okay, let's be realistic for a sec. Every scientific tool has its limits, right? Are there things we can't learn from this Ussing chamber?
You're absolutely right. It's a great question, and it shows critical thinking. While the Ussing chamber is powerful, it's mainly designed for studying epithelial tissues, like the linings of our organs and cavities.
So it's like having the perfect wrench for a specific bolt. You wouldn't use it to hammer in a nail, right?
Exactly. Researchers need to pick the right tool for the job.
And even if they perfectly control everything inside the Ussing chamber, it's still not quite the same as the complex environment inside a living organism.
That's another good point. That's actually why researchers are always trying to come up with even better models, like this organ-on-a-chip technology. It tries to recreate entire organs in a more realistic way.
So it's all about constant improvement, always pushing the boundaries of what we know about life.
Absolutely. Science is always evolving, and the Ussing chamber, while a fantastic tool, is just one piece of that puzzle.
You know, we keep coming back to how important the Ussing chamber is for drug discovery. Can you give me a specific example of how it's being used?
Well, let's think about cystic fibrosis again. Remember, the research we're looking at mentioned how the EasyMount Slider specifically has helped with scientific advances towards understanding genetic transport defects in cystic fibrosis.
Right, cystic fibrosis. It's a really tough disease affecting the lungs mostly, right? Makes it hard to breathe.
You got it. And it all boils down to a problem with how chloride ions move across cell layers, particularly in the lungs. This leads to a buildup of thick mucus.
So how does the easing chamber come into play here?
Think of it as a detective tool. Researchers can grow cells from cystic fibrosis patients right on those Snapwell inserts and then study how well they're transporting chloride.
So it's like they're zooming in on the exact problem, figuring out why those chloride ions aren't moving like they should.
Exactly. And once they figure out what's going wrong, they can start developing treatments that target that specific issue.
And the research also mentioned that this EasyMount Slider has been a big help for drug discovery research. How so?
It's all about speed and efficiency. The EasyMount Slider makes setting up these experiments so much faster, so researchers can test way more potential drugs in less time.
It's amazing how something as seemingly simple as a slider can have such a big impact.
It really is, and it just goes to show how important it is to constantly refine and improve our tools, even the smallest details, because they can lead to huge advancements in research.
Okay, we've talked a lot about the technical stuff, but I'm curious about the people behind the research. What's it like for the scientists who work with these Ussing chambers every day?
I imagine it takes a lot of patience, attention to detail, and a genuine curiosity for how things work at the tiniest levels. They're looking into this microscopic world, watching all these complex interactions, and trying to make sense of it all.
Like explorers charting unknown territory, except instead of maps and compasses, they've got pipettes and electrodes.
That's a great way to put it. And like any explorer, they need persistence and a willingness to embrace the unexpected. Because in science, the biggest discoveries often happen when you least expect them.
So it's not just about following a set of instructions. It's about being open to new possibilities, to those aha moments that can change the whole direction of research.
Exactly. And those moments are what often lead to breakthroughs that help everyone.
Speaking of benefits, are there other ways we can use this technology beyond what we've already talked about?
Oh, tons. The possibilities for the Ussing chamber are huge, and we're still discovering more. Think about studying how we absorb nutrients, how drugs are delivered throughout the body, the effects of pollution, even things like tissue engineering.
Wow, I had no idea. So we're talking about improving how our bodies use nutrients, designing better drugs, understanding how pollution affects us. The long list.
And it keeps growing. The more we learn about how things move at the cellular level, the more uses we'll find for the Ussing chamber.
It's exciting to think about all the ways this research could improve human health and help us tackle some of the biggest challenges facing our world.
Absolutely. And it all comes back to that fundamental curiosity, how does life work? That drive to understand what makes us who we are.
It's a reminder that science is a never-ending journey, not a destination. And with each new tool, each new discovery, we take another step forward on that journey.
Wow, I feel like my brain just got a serious upgrade after learning all about this Ussing chamber.
It's pretty remarkable, isn't it? Such a tiny setup, but so powerful for understanding how our bodies work.
I know. We started with those tiny Snapwell inserts, and now we're talking about how this technology is helping researchers create new drugs and understand diseases like cystic fibrosis. A lot to take in.
And I have no doubt that the Ussing chamber will keep playing a crucial role in scientific research.
I'm sure you're right. But before we wrap up, there's something I've been thinking about. We focused a lot on the benefits of all this, but are there any downsides?
You mean like potential risks or ethical concerns?
Exactly.
Well, the Ussing chamber itself is just a tool, right? It's how it's used that matters. But researchers always have to be super careful when they're working with living cells and tissues, making sure they're doing things ethically. So it's not just about scientific progress. It's about making sure that progress is responsible, too.
Absolutely. There are strict guidelines in place to ensure that any research involving living organisms is done with care and respect.
That's good to hear. It's reassuring to know that scientists are thinking about the bigger picture, not just the results.
It's definitely an ongoing conversation in the scientific community, and as our tools get more advanced, our ethical considerations have to keep pace.
Well said. So, big picture, scientific progress should always go hand in hand with ethical practices.
Couldn't agree more. The goal is to use what we learn to improve the world around us, while always staying true to those ethical principles.
I think we've covered a ton of ground today, from the nitty-gritty of how the Ussing chamber works to its impact on research and beyond. Really fascinating stuff.
Yeah, and it all starts with a simple question. How do things move in and out of our cells? Pretty incredible how much we've learned from that.
It truly is. And it speaks volumes about human curiosity, about our constant desire to explore and understand the world, even at the tiniest level.
And for everyone out there who's been listening and thinking, wow, this is cool, I encourage you to keep diving deeper into this world of cellular research. There's so much more to discover.
Yeah, embrace your inner mad scientist, folks. Who knows what amazing discoveries are just around the corner?
That's the beauty of science, right? Always something new to learn, always new frontiers to explore.
On that note, I think it's time to wrap up this deep dive. But remember, the journey of learning never ends. Keep those questions coming, keep exploring, and keep diving deep into the amazing world around us.
Until next time, stay curious.